Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is a very interesting, inspiring, dynamic woman. I personally think she's a professional politician. She has been in politics for many years. At the moment, she is on many boards. Her name is Judy Higginbotham, and she is our Woman in Focus today. Judy, you're most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Sushma. Thank you for the opportunity to come on. It's been a while.
It has been, and I've been thinking about asking you for a long time too. The last name is so interesting. I've always wondered, Higginbotham, where does it come from?
My husband's family originated in Yorkshire, in England, and they were the Higgins from the bottom of the hill.
Oh.
They moved around. They lived in Edinburgh. They lived in Ireland. But they eventually came to Canada many, many years ago. And
right.
I always was intrigued by the name Higginbotham. I thought, where did it come from? So I had to ask. And I do have a lot of his family history written down.
Isn't that
It's
beautiful?
interesting.
Yeah. So it's Higginbotham.
Yes.
Instead of bottom.
It has the affectation, Botham.
Ah, Britishers
Ham
do have
on the
that.
end, you know.
Of course. So at the moment, currently, you are on the board that you and I both are,
Yes.
White Rock. So
Yes.
you've lived in White Rock for quite some time?
White Rock, South Surrey area since 1976.
Holy mackerel.
Yes. We moved there when we were quite young and just had 2 children, babies at that point. And we were figuring we want a real home with some property to bring our family up in. So we went and looked around and I said, I'm not moving to the suburbs, Pat. I just want a nice house somewhere. I love Vancouver. Well, we ended up in the South Surrey, White Rock area. And we looked around and I said, you know, this is beautiful. I could live out here. And sure enough, we bought a home. We brought our 2 children up. We have lived since 1976 within a 6-block radius
Of that
and
area.
Loved it all the time.
The spirit around is very freeing, isn't it?
It's very much a community.
Yeah.
And people who live in White Rock love their community. They're very protective of it. As people are in South Surrey, we're very, very conscious of development.
Yes.
We're very, very conscious of safety. It is a safe community to live in.
Right.
We're very, very conscious of the number of seniors that live in the area. And another one of the areas that I work in, I'm chair of the BC section on seniors in the BC Liberal, in the National Liberal Party.
Right.
So, many years ago, when I was a young student, university, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was running as the leader of the Liberal Party, which is why I philosophically became a Liberal. And his words to young people were, travel, see the world, learn about different cultures, speak different languages, read books. I've never forgotten that. And I did travel, and I have traveled extensively. Tracy Reddy's, who was a politician in South Surrey, White Rock area, and I sat down one time, and through Facebook they said, how many countries have you been to and how many big cities?
Right.
So we listed big cities like New York, Beijing, you know, Shanghai, Kuala Lumpur, Berlin, etc. And we both had about 88 countries and cities, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm a world traveler, you know, and I laughed. But if people really, if you've taken cruises
Right.
or you've traveled as a young student, when I was 26 years old, I took 2 months because I was a teacher at that
Right.
point, I took 2 months, I flew over to Europe with my Eurail pass in my hand, and I traveled to 14 different countries.
Beautiful.
And I learned when you're in a country where they speak no English, because I went into Hungary, and trust me, Sushma, they did not speak English. We had to seek out people and act out to get what I needed or wanted.
Right.
But it was an experience where you learn when you're the minority and what it's like to be
Beautiful.
in that country.
Yes.
And you reach out and you talk to them. You want to see them. You want to find out how they live and eat
what
their
makes
food,
them tick.
and visit their families. What
Right.
makes them tick? Absolutely. And I had a wonderful trip. That was my first big travel.
Judy, I want to take you to your childhood. I want to find out more about. I know that you were not born in British Columbia.
I was born in actually Winnipegosis, Manitoba, and it was a tiny town where the only, I guess, business there was people would fly up from the United States and shoot geese and ducks during the winter and then freeze them in the local freezing place, and then they would go back home and we would have them sent down. My father owned a trucking company there, and he used to drive from Winnipeg up to the Paw and down again.
Let's take a very short commercial break and come back.
Okay.
Judy Higginbotham is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Judy Higginbotham, and we were talking about you growing up in Manitoba. So, how many in your family?
I have two brothers. They're younger than I am, so I always was the boss of the family, so to speak. And in Winnipegosis, it was just, we didn't have flushing toilets. We
Right.
didn't even have hot running water. If they wanted to, I went back and visited when I was in high school. And I remember saying one time, I think I'll wash my hair and I'd like to take a bath. And all of a sudden, all these kettles went on the stove because they had to heat up the water. And that was when I was a teenager. And this was Winnipegosis. It's probably still very much the same today, Sushma. But I left when I was about 4, and we moved across the country, and we lived in Bigger, Saskatchewan for a couple of years, and I was about 3 there. My father then was in a creamery business, and he and my uncle used to deliver milk. Would you believe it, in those days, with a horse? And being who I was at 3, I used to kind of run away because I wanted to find my father, because I would then get a ride home with the creamery and the horse and buggy. And of course, they tried to restrain me. First of all, they built a fence. I dug a hole under the fence. Then they put me on the clothesline, like they had a little harness and put me on the clothesline, and I could only run the length of the clothesline. And I was so frustrated that I lay down on the ground and I cried and cried and cried until they finally let me go. And that was my first lesson, is that it takes a village to bring up a child. And that's
Right.
exactly what they did. They went and educated the village. If you see Judy running around, make sure that she finds her father, who will then bring her home in the creamery. From there, then we came to Vancouver, and I was about 5 years old. So from snow in the winter to rain, it was a big change for us. But I loved it. The rain, I always used to love to sit and daydream and look out the window and listen to the rain. It calms me.
That's beautiful. When did you get the politics bug?
As I mentioned earlier, when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was running, he'd be given the signal by the TV chairman, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he would start talking. He would talk sense, and he talked with wisdom, but he talked with knowledge. And he made it into a beautiful speech. And as a young student, like many students in those days, we were quite mesmerized by his ability to bring us in. So I joined, and I started working in the party at that point. I used to be a volunteer at headquarters. I used to be able to phone a riding, and they would give me the list. They would give me a telephone, shut the door, and put me in there for an hour, 2 hours. I would come out, and I had an accurate poll of who was going to vote for whom. But I went up, I became campaign manager, and then somebody said, well, I guess it's your turn, Judy, you should run. And I said, run? Oh my gosh, I don't, I just never occurred to me. But in 1983, Don Ross, who was the mayor then, and Bill Fomich and Paul Easton, the three of them came knocked on my door and asked me if I would run for Surrey Council. And I said, I know nothing about municipal politics.
Right.
They said, Judy, you can speak, you're young, you're bright, you'll figure it out, and we will help you. So I ran, and I won.
Yeah.
And 25 years later, and my husband gave me this piece of jewelry, which has 2 X's and a V, and it's 25. And it was diamonds sort of in there, and he had it made for me, which shows my 25 years on council.
Beautiful.
He was very good to me, yes.
Beautiful. Your husband, how did you meet him?
Well, when I was a young woman and I was teaching school, I lived in Vancouver, right around 41st and Cambie.
Right, right.
And Pat was the resident bachelor, and he was the party guy. And I was the school teacher who lived on the 2nd floor with another school teacher. We got to know him, and any time I'd forgotten my key or whatever, Pat's apartment was on the bottom floor.
Right.
And I would have to knock on the door and say, Pat, forgot my keys, can I come through? And he would always leave it open. I'd go in and go upstairs.
Right.
And he was in the car business. So when my car broke down, which it did a few times, I would phone Pat. And I said, Pat, can you help me out? I have these problems with my car, and he would help me out. And I wouldn't date him because he was too much of a party guy until he kind of grew on me after a while. And we, you know, we've been married, or were married for 50 years before he passed away, Sushma. 2/3 of my life, and I don't think I could imagine a life without him. It was up and down, you know, challenges and high spots, but it was a good, solid marriage.
And he supported you with all your dreams.
He supported me unequivocally. He didn't want me to go out. He wanted me to stay at home and be you know, be a homemaker and whatever, but my ambitions went a little beyond. Plus, I felt it was both husband and wife have an obligation to their family and to their children.
Yes.
And Pat became the #1 father. He's adored by his son, Britton, and our daughter Karen. They really had. It was difficult letting him go. It was really a challenge. We were very much a family, even though he worked hard 24/7. I worked hard, and you know, the council and Surrey grew for 25 years. I was there. It grew from about 150,000 to over 500,000 people.
There you go. Letting him go probably was very hard.
Pat, when he was 23, had polio. And the stages make you weaker and more challenge with balance, etc. And then he had a stroke. That disabled him further. And during the last year of his life, he was pretty much bedridden. But he said, I do not want to go back to a hospital. I simply want to choose when I pass on. So he wouldn't be a burden on the family, so he wouldn't be a burden on society, and so he wouldn't be living a life that he didn't feel like he was being able to be free or to do the things that he wanted to do. He loved his family very much, and the last couple of weeks before the date, we were all around him. My daughter came over, took time off from her school. She's a vice principal now. And my son was there every day. And then on the day of, the doctor came and the nurses came, and we sat down and we were around in a circle. And Karen said, okay, Dad, let's all talk about what was our favorite vacation together. What did we do? And you know, we all agreed that our favorite vacation was one that he chose, that he set up for us, which was to Hawaii. We stayed at the Ilakai. We met Tom Selleck making a movie, and we swam and we danced. We had the most wonderful time, and that was one of 3 or 4 or 5 different family vacations we had, and that was
Beautiful
kind of
memory.
what it was. That was our last conversation with him, And it's been over a year now, so this last while I'm dealing with COVID like everybody else, I'm frustrated and challenged because I would be traveling otherwise.
I'm going to take a short commercial break, come back, talk about all the boards that you're sitting on right now and your aspirations for your children and what you want to do next in life. Judy Higginbotham is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Judy Higginbotham. Judy, I made you cry, so I'm sorry about that. Thinking about your husband, you know, you must be missing him. 50 years of your life with him. The thing that I think carries you, makes you continue your path is your passion for politics. And there are so many things that are going on, and you've been in civic, provincial, federal politics. How would you define all three of them, and which is your most favorite?
Federal politics has the issues that intrigue me, like multiculturalism, dealing with building communities, transit, you know, international affairs. Those are the intrigue. The province is delivery of service and ensuring that you get your health care, that you get your education and your social services. But municipal politics is close to your heart and close to your ground, close to the ground. It deals with taking all of those things and putting it together in a package and building communities. It is so important, I think, to build communities that are safe, that provide all the services that make a community where you want to go out and you can walk in the streets, you can shop, you look and support the local merchants, you go to school close by, you go to church close by, Sushma, and we have lots of churches of different faiths. And then you have your hospital close by. You have all of the amenities you need at your fingertips. And for 25 years, I helped build those communities.
Four different mayors.
And how, well, 4 different mayors. We laugh at that. Don Ross, of course, invited me to join. And then Bob Bose, who is a friend now. Bob is still,
you and Bob were at loggerheads.
Well, we were, they used to call it the Bob and Judy show, I think, at some point. And it was interesting because, and we were very dynamic, you know, on council. But off council, we were always good friends because Bob was an interesting person to talk to. And we always enjoyed, he and Shirley and Pat and I used to sit and talk with them at many instances. And then I worked with Doug McCallum. Doug McCallum is a hard-nosed little conservative. You know, he honestly, if he says he's going to do something, Doug will do it. And he all the other stuff is peripheral. He just made his decision. And in this last election, he made, 3 challenges that I know he's done. First of all, he wants to change from the RCMP to a local police force. This is an opportunity to build a police force, a new and modern police force. But there's a lot of you know, ties to the RCMP and the traditions that they have. He also said, I want to build and extend the SkyTrain to Langley.
That's right, he will do that.
And then he talked about smart development. Well, what he's trying to do is to build a community and fill in those holes and put the development where it should be, where the transits are, and building roads. And I mean, he's always controversial. But he's very determined, and sometimes you have to be that way to get things done. And then, of course, I served a term with Diane Watts, who had a totally different way of dealing with things. And she did a wonderful job when she was mayor of Surrey, and it took her just a short time to get into it, and she built, I think, a reputation for Surrey. And she brought the city along as it is today, as a modern city. And she did a very fine job. Yes.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Right now, with my husband, I think for the last 10 years, when I retired. I wanted to be with family and I wanted to do things, but I always had my finger into something, Sushma.
Yes.
I was always on the heritage. That's sort of a love of mine, arts and culture and heritage. I also was on the Chamber of Commerce because I believe that there has to be this business, building businesses in Surrey, which is building jobs, which is keeping young people around. And then the Multicultural Society that you and I belong to in the South Surrey area, because Moti Bali brought us in. I think you're related to him. Yes. This sweet dear man, you know, who persuades everybody to get involved.
Very infectious.
And very infectious. And then I'm looking at, I'm a Rotarian. I also am on Toastmasters. I am now on the Options, which is the 50 Women of Options, and I'm pledging to raise $25,000, which incidentally, I've pretty much met my goal.
Oh, fantastic.
But I want to continue to make...
Maybe a bit more.
A bit more.
Yes.
I did donate $1,000, and I'm asking people out there if they may consider matching my donation.
That's a very good point.
I believe in it so much. Options I have worked with. I worked before I was on council with Options. I used to teach ESL to Chinese women. I worked when I was on council and set up a mum's daycare in one of the North Surrey schools. After it now, I'm working with Options now, and I'm thinking there's such a fine organization, and they're building a 100 affordable housing unit for women in distress on 81st and King George Boulevard.
Beautiful. Good for you. And I think you will be able to do that because you're a very determined woman. And I've admired that in you for as many years as I have lived in this country, which is going to be 50.
Wow.
And it is amazing to meet women like you that one can look up to and say, wow, that's my age person who is going to be, you know.
Yes, we are,
aren't we?
We are.
All the more power to you, Judy. Thank you so much for being our Woman in Focus today.
And thank you so much. You're a role model for young women to aspire to do some of the things that you've done and to continue on too, Sushma. Thank you for the opportunity.
Judy Higginbotham has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.